Hi everyone, welcome to Jawaras. Let's continue our discussion of Spring Core. And in this video, we are going to talk about method injection. We will see what is method injection, why do we use it, and when to use it. So let's start. First, let's see what is the problem that method injection tries to solve. Let's say we have two beans, bean A and bean B, and bean A has dependency on bean B. Now there can be four scenarios. Let's say both bean A and bean B are singletons. That means we want singleton instance of both class A and class B. In that case, we can specify scope of bean A and bean B as singleton, and it will work fine. If both, if we want class A and class B both to be non-singleton, then we can specify prototype scope for both beans, and it will work. And the third case is we want non-singleton scope or non-singleton instance of class A and singleton instance of class B. Then also we can define scope as prototype for bean A and scope as singleton for bean B, and it will work fine. Now the fourth case is, let's say bean A, or we want class A to be singleton and class B to be non-singleton. In that case, if we specify singleton scope for bean A and prototype scope for bean B, it won't work. And why won't it work is bean A has a scope singleton. That means it will be created only once, and all the dependencies or the properties will be injected only once. And since A has a dependency on B, B will also be injected only once in the bean A. So there can be multiple instances of bean B since its scope is prototype, but this will be injected only once in bean A, and bean A will always have one instance of bean B. So there can be multiple instances of class B in the application context, but singleton instance of class A will always have one instance of class B. That means uh, we want to be able to get multiple instances of bean B inside bean A. So this defining singleton for bean A and prototype scope for bean B won't work. Now how do we solve this issue? First possible solution is that we can make A aware of application context. That means class A will be able to know, or will be able to access the application context, and whenever it needs B or it needs instance of class B, then it can just access the bean using that context, and it will get a new bean each time. So this is how we can see that. So in the yellow color you can see the bean definition. So we have defined two beans, bean first of class A, second of class B, and bean V has a scope prototype. That means whenever we try to access bean of type class B, we will get a new instance every time. And on the left hand side, you can see the Java code of class A. So class A implements application context aware, and then it needs to override one method, which you can see at the um, bottom, which is set application context. It will get an application context as parameter, then it can set the context instance variable. So now we will have application context. Now let's say we have a function called fun. Inside that we need a new instance of b every time we call this method. So we can say we can call a method called create b. Now create b returns different instances of type b since the scope of b is prototype. So inside create b method we can just return context.getBean b.class. So it will try to get bean of type b from the application context, and since in the bean definition we have specified the scope as prototype, so every time we will get a new instance of class b. So that's one way. So let's see how do we do that. So I've already created a project. So this is pom.xml, and I have specified Java version 17, and Spring version 6.0.11, and I have added Spring context dependency. So if you have watched previous videos, you are already aware of it. Now I have created main class which is main method, and here I am creating application context from beans.xml file. This is the beans.xml file. Now in the author service, yeah, so we have uh, this main class inside main package. Inside services package we have author service, and inside repositories package we have author repository. Now let's say each time we want to print a new author repository. So we cannot just have instance variable here, because in that case, since author service will be singleton, and if we have instance of author repository here, so that will be single instance only throughout the life cycle of author service. So we want to be able to print different repositories. But let's say what we want is whenever we call this method, we print different instance of repositories each time. So what we can do is, let's say we can say author repository equal to new author repository. But we don't want to do that. We want to get this author repository from application context or from the Spring IOC container, because IOC container may inject or may modify the behavior of author's repository, and we want that bean. We don't want to create a new instance ourselves. So how do we do that? So as I have already specified that first we need to create bean definitions. So inside beans, let's create those. Let's create a bean of type services.author service, and let's create a bean of type repositories.author repository, and its scope should be prototype. Otherwise, each time we will get the same instance if the scope is singleton. So that's it. Now, okay. After that, what we need to do is inside class A. So that means inside author service, what we can do is we can implement application context aware interface, and this we need to override one method which is set application context. So this provides us with an application context. So what we can do is we can create an application context here, private application context, and what we can do, this dot context equal to application context. Now let's create a method here. Let's say private, and it will return author repository. Let's say create author repository. So this method will return a bean of type author repository. So what we can do is context dot get bean author repository dot class, and we can just return it. And here, let's say author repository, a repository will be this dot create author repository, and let's just print it. Print author repository. And in the main method, what we are doing is first we are creating application context here, then we are getting author service from the application context, and then we are calling print repository method twice. Each time it should print new author repository. You can see this author repository and this repository, these are different. But here if the scope is singleton, which is default scope also, so the default scope is singleton, then both are same. And you can attribute scope with default value singleton is superfluous, so we just need to use prototype. Okay, so that's a possible solution, but there are some drawbacks of this method. Let's say that. So the drawback is our business logic is tightly coupled with the Spring framework. So here you can see this is author service. So this here our this is responsible for business logic, but here we are coupling it with application context aware and that is from Spring framework. So then that means we are tightly coupling author service with Spring framework. So that's not a good idea to strongly couple the business logic with the underlying framework which we are using. So we don't want to do that. So then what is the solution? The solution is method injection. There are two type of method injection. First, let's look at lookup method injection. So what lookup method injection is? This is the ability of the container, that means Spring IOC container, to override methods of bean A. So bean A means bean A is the bean which has a dependency on bean B. So that's the thing. And it typically returns a prototype or prototype, that means non-singleton bean B, and it uses a library called cglib to generate a subclass dynamically of class A. And if you see in the previous slide, we have a method called createB. So what container does is it creates a subclass of this class A at the runtime, and then it overrides this createB method. Now you might think, how does it override? So we need to tell Spring container in the bean definitions that you need to override this createB method, and you also need to tell what that method should return. So that we will see soon. So now there are some things to note. First is, since the Spring IOC container creates a subclass of class A, that means A cannot be final. Also, it overrides method createB. So createB method should also not be final. So that is it. So class A and method B should not be final. Now we need to have stub implementation. So what you can do is, like, you can make this class A abstract, because you know that subclass will be created of class A, and the implementation of createB will be created. So you can mark this method in this class is abstract. But if you do that, then auto wiring will not work for this class. That means this class won't be auto wired into another classes, because abstract classes cannot be auto wired into another classes. Okay, and it also does not work with factory methods and at the rate bean annotated methods. Now this is how we do that. So we just create a class A. So we already have a class A, and there are two methods called, first is fun, second is createB. So fun method calls createB method to get the new instance of B each time. Now we created, or we marked createB method as abstract method. So since there is an abstract method in this class, so the class also needs to be abstract. Now you might think, okay, we have marked createB method as abstract, but where is the implementation? So as I already mentioned that at the runtime, the container will create a subclass of class A, but we'll need to tell that how should it implement createB method. So if you see below in the bean definition, at the bottom we have defined a bean with class B, and its scope is prototype, and we have given ID bean B. Now in the at the above this bean definition, we have bean definition for class A, and in this definition we have an element called lookup method, and its name should be the name of method. So that is create B. That means which method we want to implement or override. And then there is a attribute called bean. So bean is that what this method should return. So we know that this method should return B. That means object of B. That may, in that case we can specify bean equal to bean v. That means it will return bean v as output of create b method. So that is it. Now one more thing, you can create this create b method by four ways in class A. So you can have abstract methods either using protected or public access modifiers, or you can remove abstract and you can just create some stub implementation, or you can return anything, but that will be you know overridden by the this Spring IOC container. So now let's see it in action. Okay, so since we don't want this author service to be aware of application context, so we can just remove it from here. And so if we remove it, then we can remove this as well. Then let's remove application context from here. Now we cannot use context here, so let's just comment out, and I will make it protected, not final, abstract. Now we need to make author service as a abstract as well, and if it's abstract we cannot give an implementation here, just like that. What we are doing now, you can see we are not author service is not dependent on Spring framework, so there are no imports related to Spring framework. So now this is called loose coupling, and we should always follow that. Now there is a method called create author repository, and it returns author repository. Now let's go to beans.xml, and here we get some error because this is abstract class and abstract class are not allowed for non-abstract beans. So that means we should have a class which extends class author service and which implements all the abstract method. So we can we can tell the container to create such class at runtime. So for that we need to uh, have an element called lookup method. It takes name, so method name and bean. That means which bean should this method return. So let's give it some ID called author repository, and let's give author repository here. Now let's run it, and you can see it is working fine. That's how it's working. Now let's see. So instead of protected, you can have public as well. Okay, so it's working fine. Now you can remove this abstract, and let's just remove it. So what you can do, like you can return null as well. You can return null here, but this will be overridden by this definition. So now if we remove it, you can see we are printing null because it is returning null here, but this will just override that behavior of the method, and we can just we can just leave it return null as well, so that doesn't matter now. So that's about the lookup method injection. Okay, now there is another type of method injection which is called arbitrary method replacement. So that means just to replace the method. So it replaces existing method implementation with another, but it is less useful. So if you know what you are doing, then you can use it. How do we use it? Let's say we have a class A. So this is the same class, and here we have a method called fun, and it calls create v method, and it uses that value returned by create v method. Now let's say there is a public B create v method. So this create v method returns object of type B, and for now let's just return this method. Now we want we want to override this method, but we don't want to modify this class. So what we can do is we can class a replacement class. So we can give any name. So I've given a replacement create B, and it should implement method replacer. So this is an interface, so it should implement method replacer. But we what we want to do is we want to return an instance of class B from the application context. So for that we need to make it application context aware, and we can do that because this is not our business logic. Our business logic is in class A, but class A is not aware of application context. But replacement create B is aware of application context, and that is totally fine. Now, now we need to override two methods, one for method replacer and one for application context aware. Now let's first see for application context aware. So here, application context aware for application context aware interface, we need to implement set application context method. So it takes application context as parameter. Now what we are doing is we are just assigning this application context to the uh, instance variable application context which we have defined. Now method replacer provides one method to implement, which is re-implement. That means we need to re-implement a method. So and we can do any additional computation with the obj method and args which we have passed here. And so there is a typo. So object array, it should not be args, it should be args. So that's just a name. So it can be args as well, but it's arguments. And for now, let's just return context.getBean b.class. That means get a bean of type B from the application context and return that. Let's see that in action. So, okay. So what I will do is so let's say I will just comment it out. And here I can say first lookup method injection. And second, so yeah, like we don't need to comment out that, I guess. We can just keep it lookup method injection, and second is arbitrary method replacement. So now for arbitrary method replacement, we need, we have already seen, we need to create a class. So let's create a class in repositories. So the name I will give is replacement create author repository, and it should implement first application context aware, and second is method replacer. Now let's implement methods. Okay. So first let's implement set application context. What I will do is this dot application, or this dot context equal to application context, and here we can create a field private application context. Okay. And here we can return in the implement method we can return a bean of type author repository. So let's return context.getBean author repository dot class. That is it. Now let's go to beans.xml file. Yeah. So now we have created this replacement class, but we have no tail spring container to replace create b method with re-implement method of replacement create b class. How do we do that? In the bean definition. So in the bean definition, at the top we have a bean for class B, and its scope is prototype. Then at the bottom we have a bean of class replacement create B, and we have given it an ID. Now in the bean or in the bean definition of class bean A or class, this class would be A. This is a typo. Class A, we create an element replaced method. So it takes two things. One is which method we want to replace, and second is um, the class which replaces this method. So we only give it the class, and class means you know that the bean reference. That will be replacement create b, which we have defined below. So what it will do is it will replace create b method with re-implement method of replacer bean. Let's see that. So now what I can do is I can just comment it out and I can say one, this is lookup method injection, and I will comment it out. Okay, now let's this is second one, arbitrary method replacement. Okay, and let's create a bean of type obviously repositories dot author repository, and its id we can say repository, and yeah, let's say scope. The scope will be prototype because we want different instance each time. Let's create a bean of class repositories dot replacement author replacement create author repository, and let's give it an id called replacement this. Okay, now after it we create a bean of class services dot author service. Now let's replace the method. So we will replace the method create author repository, and replacer bean will be this one. Okay. Now let's run it. So it's working fine. So we don't see any difference here. But what we can do is because if let's say we don't uh, use replaced method, it's returning null because in the author service this create author repository returns null. What we can do is let's just remove the comment and here implement. Let's print something. Let's print this and rerun it, and you can see this is being printed, and each time we are getting different instance from the application context because the scope of bnb is prototype. Thank you everyone. That's how method injection work in a spring core. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video. Until then, keep learning. Bye.